right, so let's begin science. If you have a copy of Life on CERTSI, go ahead and get that out. If you don't have a copy, then you're good to go. You are good to wait. So I want you to pause the video and tell somebody what you remember about our readings from last week in Life on CERTSI. And they talked a lot about different insects, the way they get the insects. I think we're going to read a lot more about how they get animals and insects and observations here, but they talked some about the bathroom situation, so you can tell somebody about that. And, oh, no, they didn't talk about insects. They talked more about seeds dispersion and the growth of plants. Sorry, I was looking ahead. So pause the video, tell somebody about that, come back, and we will go ahead and begin reading. Okay, so we are going to start back on page 40 if you do have the book. Here's a picture of Mr. Erling collecting insects, and one of the insects, it's called a tiny springtail. So I'll show that to you. You see that, Mr. Erling, and then that's the tiny springtail insect that we'll read about here. Okay, let's begin. Insects and spiders are regularly found on the spit too. They arrive much like seeds and plants do, floating in on air currents or waves, hitching a ride on a bird or rafting on debris. Once here, they face the same harsh conditions that plants do. They thrive while they can. Some, like aphids, are often found in the mounds of plants that spring up each year. Others rely on microenvironments that are unique to the debris-strewn spit, such as the moist underside of decaying planks and boards that have washed ashore. Today, Erling and Matthias plan to find and sample these creatures. The spit is pretty stable, Erling says as he surveys the low beach. Usually there is not much new to find here. The new stuff usually happens in the gull colony. But that won't stop him from looking. Through the gray drizzle, he watches Matthias head down the beach toward the tip of the peninsula. And then he turns his attention to the part of the spit he'll be surveying. He spots a wooden plank that looks promising. It's buried in the sand a bit, but not so deep as to be difficult to move. He pulls his tools from his pocket as he approaches the board, then drops to his knees beside it. Paintbrush in hand, he flips the board and leans in to study its sandy underside. After a few seconds, he sees the movement he is looking for. Tiny, delicate invertebrates called springtails. He opens his collection vial, dips the tip of the brush into the alcohol inside, then gently touches the wet bristles to a springtail body. The tiny springtail sticks to the wet brush, allowing Erling to easily lift it from the board and deposit it in his collection vial. He takes several more springtails this way, then replaces the board exactly as he found it. Erling scours several more planks, then scans piles of trash and mounds of green sandwort plants with equal vigor. He collects a few more springtails and some aphids too. He also finds sturdier invertebrates, tiny beetles and bright red spider mites, and gently collects them with tweezers. These are all creatures that are unlikely to fall into the pitfall traps he set yesterday, so hand-picking is the only way to sample them. And here's a picture of the spider mite and the tiny beetle. Can you see that? And then I have to show you this real quick. Hold on just a second, because it's too cute not to. Can you see that? It's our cute little rabbit. She keeps looking at my computer. I don't know if you can see her now. Where is she? I'm not sure if I'm doing this right. There you go. Okay, she's funny. Anyway, I thought I'd show you that real quick. Okay, let's keep going. Erling thinks of the insects he finds here year after year as old friends. He doesn't think he's found any new species today, but knowing for sure will require patient examination of the entire collection under a microscope. This is work he'll do later back in his lab on the mainland. He collects so many insects on each CERTSI trip that there's currently a large backlog. Erling is still identifying species collected in the summer of 2007. This is just one of the reasons he's so grateful to have a capable student like Matthias working with him. Matthias is 29 years old and has been studying entomology with Erling for 2 years. Last year, as a beginning student in Erling's lab, he was invited to CERTSI for the first time. He knew the moment he arrived that it would not be his last summer here. In fact, at the end of the week-long 2014 expedition, Matthias intentionally left his pillow and sleeping bag behind in the research hut. Why did I do that? I think it was a clear message. I was going to return to CERTSI, he says. I don't plan to ever bring them home. Matthias is a quiet scientist, observant and patient. He watches Erling carefully, always eager to emulate his mentor's technique and soak up Erling's knowledge. I have learned more from him in the past year than in all my courses so far, Matthias says. That right there is a reason why we should be outside doing a lot of observation and recording, and less time thinking that taking a course is how we're going to learn. So, okay, this next page is a picture of Matthias walking on the spit. It's a lot of rocks, aren't there? So pause now and talk about to someone, or you can draw a picture if you'd like to, of a couple of things, animals, insects that Mr. Erling and Matthias found on their walkabout on that rainy day. And if you need to, I hope I said pause. Maybe if I didn't say pause, pause, and then come back and we'll continue reading. Okay, let's continue. It's clear that the mentor admires the student just as much. Maddie has an intensity of interest, Erling says, a curiosity, and he doesn't watch the clock. This meant a lot to Erling. Surveying insects in the field for 5 days is not an easy job. It requires great patience and intense focus. It requires working in the rain, in the sun, in the cold, in the heat, in the daytime, and sometimes into the night. Occasionally, it allows for proper dinner breaks. Often it doesn't. The work requires passion and dedication, and Matthias is a natural. As an added bonus, he has sharp eyes. Matthias sees more than I do, Erling admits with a smile. He has younger eyes. When Erling and Matthias meet up in the middle of the spit, each have surveyed his assigned area. They talk in quiet tones about what they've turned up. A lot of the usual suspects, they think. They murmur about springtails and mites and roundworms as they head back to the research hut. Iceland requires all citizens to retire from their jobs on their 70th birthday. For Erling, that's just a few years away. He doesn't actually plan to stop his work on CERTSI. He expects to join future expeditions as a photographer, continuing the pictorial history he's amassed over the past 45 years. I'm certainly not going to start golfing when I retire, he jokes. I'll keep on coming to CERTSI. Now this picture, before we turn the page, is a lot of the trash that they find on the island. That's trash that has either been washed off beaches or thrown into the ocean, and a lot of it arrives there on the beach. That's kind of sad. Now today that I'm filming, which is Wednesday, and you'll be watching this on Thursday, is actually Earth Day, and one of my girls wants to go pick up trash along the roadside near our house, and I agree. I think it's very sad when people throw trash of any kind. It's not that hard to find a trash can to put it in. Page 44. And he does recognize that it's time to train his replacement, someone who will continue to survey the insects on CERTSI in the decades to come. On the way back to the hut, even though their collecting is done for the day, Erling occasionally stops in the middle of a sentence, grabs for his tweezers, and drops to his knees. He stabs at the sand, usually coming up with an insect even Matthias hadn't seen. You can develop this ability to see. You just have to know what to look for and where to look, he says. After a long day of collecting insects on the spit in the rain and an even longer trip to the gull colony to set up another type of insect trap, Erling and Matthias finally return to the hut. Matthias unpacks the day's samples, labeling and preparing them for transport back to the lab. Erling starts frying fish, enough for the entire team to eat for dinner. A lovely aroma has begun to fill the hut when two unexpected things happen. The sun comes out, and Portis brings a message from the spit. Come quick, Portis tells Erling. Borgpor says to bring your camera. and it can only mean one thing: a new species. Since Erling recorded the first birds bred on Surtsey, the black guillemot chicks he discovered in 1970, 15 species of birds have been found breeding here. Scientists suspect that other species might be breeding on the island, but definite proof has yet to be found. For example, Erling had earlier found a cracked eggshell in the gull colony, and it looked like an eider duck egg. Were eider ducks nesting on Surtsey, or did a gull steal an eider duck egg from a nest on a nearby island and fly it over to Surtsey to eat? Intriguingly, scientists later found the dead carcass of an adult male eider duck on the island. Had he been breeding on Surtsey? It was impossible to know for sure. In order to add eider duck to the list of Surtsey's breeding birds, scientists would need to find an actual eider duck nest. Better still, they'd need to find eider duck eggs or chicks. It turns out that an eider duck chick is exactly what Borgpor has spotted. 3 eider duck chicks, in fact, waddling along beside their mother on the spit. Erling arrives in time to verify the find, and he captures the little family on film. This was the perfect plan, Erling jokes on the way back to the cabin, his trusty camera still around his neck. He helped the team collect definitive proof that eider ducks were breeding on Surtsey. And when we get back to the hut, someone else will have finished cooking the dinner. I think that was his plan. So look how cute is that? Eider ducks. Such cute babies. And that mama's pretty too. And then this is the team looking at them. And Mr. Erling taking a picture. So tell someone a little bit about what they just found, or you can draw a picture of it if you want to. You can always pause this and draw a picture of it. So in your notes on the email, I was told you're going to make a, if you haven't already, you're going to do a, I'm trying to find it, a pitfall trap like this one. So here's a picture right there. See that little cup? And see how he's got a lid kind of over it, propped up on one side with a nail or a piece of metal. You can do that. So you're going to make one of those and put it somewhere in your yard in the same place, and go out every morning and evening to check on it for a week. Now you can do it longer if you want to, but for your science experiment this week, you're going to do it for a week. And then you're going to record what kind of animals, insects fall in that. So I told you that I would show you a chart. So I made a chart, and yours should look similar to this. So it should have 7 days. And then I have morning, day, and evening. If you want to go out there in the middle of the day and see what happened, that would be good too. You don't have to fill out the day. I just put that in there because I thought it'd be fun. And then any notes or thoughts you have at the end of each day, you can put down there. But under the morning and evening, at the very least, just write down the list of animals. Don't forget to put alcohol in the bottom of it, probably about this much. I don't know if you can see my fingers. There we go. So maybe ½ an inch of alcohol in there, and that will kill your insects, but it will also, you know, they can't crawl out, so you can be able to tell what insects are in there. And then at the end of a week, excuse me, at the end of the week, send me a picture of your chart and what you learned and all the different insects that are on there. So have a good week observing animals and insects, and I will see you next week.